Zara's four arms moved with practiced grace as she arranged the luminescent flowers in their shared dwelling's main chamber. The Ketharin blooms pulsed with soft blue light, their bioluminescent petals responding to her gentle touch. She had learned that Marcus found their glow soothing, though she suspected he was simply being kind. Humans, she had discovered, were remarkably considerate creatures. The sound of the entrance seal hissing open brought a warm flutter to her chest cavity. Marcus stepped through, his tall frame slightly hunched from exhaustion. His brown hair was disheveled, and there were grease stains on his maintenance uniform. Even after a long shift in the lower engineering decks of Harmony Station, he managed to smile when he saw her. "Working late on the atmospheric processors again?" Zara asked, her translator implant converting her melodic Ketharin clicks and whistles into standard galactic. Marcus nodded, pulling off his work gloves. The tertiary filtration system had a cascade failure, nothing dangerous, just tedious to repair. He walked over and gently touched one of her secondary arms, a gesture she had taught him months ago. Among her people, it was a sign of deep affection and trust. Zara marveled at how quickly he had adapted to her customs. Most species in the Galactic Coalition barely tolerated the physical differences between them and others. Humans, however, seemed to embrace diversity with an enthusiasm that still surprised her. Marcus had learned to communicate in her native language, had memorized the cultural significance of her four-armed physiology, and even prepared traditional Ketharin meals despite the fact that some of the spices made his eyes water terribly. "I prepared the evening meal," she said, leading him toward their dining area. "I replicated that pasta dish you enjoy, though I still do not understand your species' fascination with combining grain products with fermented dairy." Marcus laughed, a sound that always reminded her of the wind chimes her grandmother had kept in the family spire back on Kethera Prime. "When you put it like that, it does sound weird, but trust me, it's delicious." They settled at the table, Marcus using the human-sized chair, while Zara arranged her longer limbs on the traditional Ketharin resting platform he had installed for her. As they ate, she watched him with the analytical mind that had made her one of the station's most respected xenobiologists. Humans were fascinating subjects, though Marcus had long since ceased to be merely a research interest. "Dr. Veeks wants to expand the cultural exchange program," she mentioned, twirling the pasta around her eating utensil with two hands, while gesturing with the other two. "She believes that human flexibility and adaptability could help other species overcome integration difficulties." Marcus paused mid-bite. "What kind of difficulties?" Quote, "What kind of difficulties? Well, the Graxani delegation still refuses to share communal spaces with the Filthin. Something about incompatible pheromone signatures, and the Zephyrian trade representatives keep getting into disputes with the Thornback merchants over territorial protocols. Sounds like they need someone to help them find middle ground," Marcus said thoughtfully. "Humans are good at that, aren't we?" Zara's primary eyes focused on him, while her secondary eyes continued to monitor their surroundings, a Ketharin instinct she had never been able to completely suppress. "Your species does seem to possess an unusual talent for finding peaceful solutions to complex problems." It was true. In the 6 months since human representatives had joined Harmony Station, the number of interspecies conflicts had decreased by 47%. Not because humans were stronger or more technologically advanced than other coalition members, but because they had an almost supernatural ability to understand and empathize with radically different perspectives. Marcus exemplified this trait. When they had first met during a diplomatic function, Zara had been struggling to communicate with a crystalline delegate whose communication method involved complex harmonic resonances. The conversation had been going nowhere until Marcus had quietly suggested that Zara try incorporating her natural clicking sounds into her speech pattern. The result had been the first successful human Ketharin crystalline three-way dialogue in coalition history. "I worry sometimes," Marcus said, interrupting her thoughts. "About what?" "That people see us as too soft, too accommodating." He set down his fork and met her gaze. "The galaxy isn't always a safe place, and diplomacy doesn't work with everyone." Zara reached across the table with her tertiary arm and touched his hand. "Gentleness is not weakness, Marcus. Your species' commitment to peaceful coexistence is admirable. Maybe. But what happens when we run into someone who mistakes kindness for an invitation to take advantage? Then you adapt, Zara said simply. It is what humans do best. After their meal, they moved to the observation lounge, where a massive transparent aluminum window provided a view of the station's exterior and the star field beyond. Harmony Station orbited a red dwarf star in the neutral zone, specifically chosen for its location at the intersection of 7 different species' territorial claims. It was meant to be a symbol of cooperation, a place where the various members of the Galactic Coalition could work together without the political complications that plagued their home worlds. Marcus stood behind Zara as she pressed against the window, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. Through her skin, she could feel the warmth of his body and the steady rhythm of his breathing. Humans, she had learned, were remarkably warm-blooded creatures. Most species maintained a body temperature just a few degrees above their environment to conserve energy. Humans burned through calories like a plasma torch, maintaining a constant temperature that made them living heat sources. Look, Marcus said, pointing toward a section of space where running lights indicated approaching vessels. The evening supply convoy. Zara followed his gaze and counted the ships. 12 freighters. The same number as always. She paused, her analytical mind automatically cataloging details, though they appear to be running slightly behind schedule. Probably had to wait for clearance from the Corvin Expanse. There have been reports of increased pirate activity in that sector. Pirates. Zara shuddered slightly, her natural coloration shifting to a darker blue. The galaxy was indeed not always a safe place. While the major species of the coalition maintained relative peace, the spaces between their territories were often lawless regions, where violence was the primary form of negotiation. She had read reports about human encounters with pirates. Of course, the results were always the same. The humans would attempt to negotiate, offer reasonable compromises, and generally try to resolve the situation peacefully. When that failed, they would retreat and call for coalition peacekeeping forces. It was sensible, logical, and exactly what she would expect from a civilized species. Have you ever encountered pirates before? She asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Once. During my first assignment, on a transport vessel carrying medical supplies to a plague-affected colony in the Rim territories. What happened? We tried to negotiate. Offered to share part of our cargo in exchange for safe passage. His hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. They weren't interested in negotiations. So you called for help? The nearest coalition patrol was 3 days away. The colony couldn't wait 3 days. Zara turned in his arms, studying his face. There was something in his expression she couldn't quite identify, a shadow behind his eyes that spoke of experiences he rarely discussed. The transport captain decided to make a run for it, Marcus continued. We made it to the colony, delivered the supplies. Everyone was safe. It sounded like a typical human response to a crisis. Peaceful, measured, ultimately successful through careful planning, and perhaps a bit of luck. Yet something in Marcus's tone suggested there was more to the story. Before she could ask, the lights in their quarters dimmed automatically as the station entered its night cycle. Marcus yawned, a purely human expression of fatigue that involved stretching his jaw wide and making a soft sound. Long day, he said. Ready for sleep? Zara nodded, though her people actually entered a state of meditative rest rather than the complete unconsciousness that humans called sleep. She found it remarkable that humans could simply shut down their consciousness for hours at a time, trusting their bodies to continue functioning without conscious oversight. It spoke to either tremendous evolutionary confidence or astounding naivety. As they prepared for rest, Zara reflected on how seamlessly their lives had intertwined. Marcus had adapted to her need for cooler temperatures and higher humidity. She had learned to appreciate the human custom of sharing sleeping space, even though Ketherans traditionally rested in solitary meditation chambers. Zara? Marcus's voice was soft in the darkened room. Yes? What would you do if someone threatened you? I mean, really threatened you, not just posed a diplomatic challenge. The question surprised her. I suppose I would attempt to de-escalate the situation through communication. If that failed, I would seek assistance from station security. And if security wasn't available, then I would retreat and contact the Coalition Emergency Response Network. What if retreat wasn't an option? Zara raised herself on her elbows, though in the darkness she could barely see his silhouette. Marcus, why are you asking these questions? 1. Just curious about how different species handle threat assessment. But there was something in his voice that suggested more than casual curiosity. A tension she had never heard before. Humans prefer to avoid violence, she said carefully. It is one of the qualities I admire most about your people. We do prefer to avoid it, Marcus agreed. But preference and capability are different things. Before Zara could respond, he had settled back into sleep position. And within minutes she could hear the slow, steady breathing that indicated he had entered the human rest state. She remained awake much longer, pondering his words and wondering what experiences had prompted such questions. The next morning brought news that would soon make those questions terrifyingly relevant. Zara was in her laboratory, analyzing soil samples from a recently discovered world in the Perseus Arm, when her communication terminal chimed with an emergency signal. The holographic display activated automatically, revealing the stern features of Station Commander Thylex, a Corvan whose reptilian features were set in what Zara had learned to recognize as extreme concern. All department heads report to the command center immediately, Thylex announced. Priority Alpha. Priority Alpha meant a potential threat to station security. In the 3 years since Harmony Station had become operational, there had never been a Priority Alpha alert. Zara secured her samples and made her way through the station's corridors, noting the increased presence of security personnel and the tension radiating from every crew member she passed. The command center was located in the station's central hub, protected by multiple redundant shield generators and emergency protocols. When she arrived, she found herself in the company of the station's senior staff. Commander Thylex, Security Chief Mordak, Engineering Supervisor Kelthane, and a handful of other department heads from various species. Marcus was there as well, representing the human-civilian population aboard the station. The situation is this, Commander Thylex began without preamble. Long-range sensors have detected a fleet of vessels approaching our position, 12 ships, heavy cruiser class, bearing the energy signatures consistent with Ravager Guild vessels. Zara's blood went cold. The Ravager Guild was perhaps the most feared pirate organization in this sector of the galaxy. Unlike typical raiders who sought quick profits, the guild was known for taking entire stations and colonies hostage, stripping them of everything valuable before leaving the survivors to face slow death in the void. Their estimated arrival time? Asked Security Chief Mordak. 18 hours, Thylex replied. I have already sent emergency signals to the Coalition, but the nearest response fleet is 47 hours away. The implications were clear. Harmony Station would be facing the Ravager Guild alone. What are our defensive capabilities? Asked Supervisor Kelthane. Minimal, Thylex admitted. Our shield generators can withstand moderate weapon fire, but these are research and diplomatic facilities, not military installations. Our security force consists of 23 officers equipped for crowd control and minor disputes, not combat with professional pirates. Evacuation? Suggested someone from the back of the room. Impossible. We have over 3,000 residents representing 47 different species. Our evacuation capacity is roughly 300 individuals, and even if we could evacuate everyone, the nearest safe harbor is beyond our transport range. A heavy silence fell over the room. Zara found herself thinking about Marcus's questions from the previous night, wondering if he had somehow sensed what was coming. We could try to negotiate, offered Dr. Veeks, the station's diplomatic coordinator. Perhaps offer them something in exchange for safe passage. Commander Thylex's expression darkened. Intelligence reports indicate that the Ravager Guild does not negotiate. Their standard procedure is to disable a target's defenses, board, strip everything of value, and then vent the atmosphere. More silence. Zara noticed that Marcus had remained perfectly still throughout the briefing, his face expressionless. While everyone else showed signs of fear or anxiety, he seemed almost calm. "What about the human military protocols?" asked Security Chief Mordak suddenly. "I have heard that your species maintains certain emergency procedures." All eyes turned to Marcus. Zara saw something flicker across his features, gone so quickly she almost missed it. "Humans prefer diplomatic solutions," Marcus said carefully. "Violence is always a last resort. But if it becomes necessary?" Mordak pressed. "Then we do what we must to protect innocent lives." The way he said it sent an unexpected chill down Zara's spine. There was something in those words, a certainty that seemed at odds with the gentle, accommodating man she knew. "I recommend we continue attempting to contact the Coalition Emergency Fleet," Marcus continued. "In the meantime, we should prepare our defensive systems and evacuation protocols as much as possible." Commander Thylex nodded grimly. "All department heads will coordinate with their teams to implement emergency procedures. We have 18 hours to prepare for the impossible." As the meeting broke up, Zara caught up with Marcus in the corridor outside the command center. "Are you worried?" she asked. "About the pirates?" "You seemed very calm in there." Marcus stopped walking and looked at her directly. "Panic helps no one, Zara. If these raiders are really coming, then we need to think clearly and make smart decisions. But what can we do? We are researchers and diplomats, not soldiers. We do whatever it takes to survive," Marcus said simply. There it was again, that note in his voice that she couldn't quite identify, as if he was talking about something far more specific than general survival instincts. They spent the day implementing what few defensive measures were available to them. Emergency force fields were activated in critical areas. Non-essential personnel were moved to the station's most protected sections. Food and medical supplies were distributed to emergency shelters, but everyone knew these were merely gestures. When the Ravager Guild arrived, Harmony Station would fall. As the hours passed, Zara found herself observing Marcus more carefully. He moved through the preparations with quiet efficiency, helping where needed, offering calm reassurance to panicking civilians. Yet she noticed details that troubled her. The way he seemed to automatically catalog defensive positions and escape routes. How his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, as if identifying potential threats and advantages. The fact that he had somehow acquired an emergency communication device that she was certain was not standard civilian equipment. "Marcus," she said as they returned to their quarters for what might be their last normal evening together. "Is there something you have not told me about your background?" He was silent for a long moment. "What do you mean? You are not behaving like the other civilians. You seem prepared for this situation in a way that suggests experience." Marcus sat heavily in his chair, running his hands through his hair. "My job before coming to Harmony Station was maintenance and engineering on civilian transport vessels." "Yes, you told me that. But transport vessels do not typically require the kind of tactical awareness you have been displaying today. Transport vessels in the Rim territories do," Marcus said quietly. "When you are carrying medical supplies or emergency rations to colony worlds, you become a target for raiders. We had to learn to adapt. Adapt how? By being prepared for trouble." Zara waited, sensing there was more he was not saying. Finally, Marcus looked up at her with an expression she had never seen before. Sad, determined, and somehow apologetic. "Zara, there are things about human nature that even we do not like to acknowledge about ourselves. We prefer to be peaceful, diplomatic, cooperative, but when those options are removed..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "When those options are removed, what? Then we become something else entirely." The attack came 2 hours earlier than expected. Zara was in the central laboratory when the first alarms began screaming throughout Harmony Station. The emergency lighting cast everything in harsh red tones as automated voices announced in 17 different languages that hostile vessels had been detected and all personnel should report to designated safe zones immediately. She was gathering critical research data when Marcus appeared in the laboratory doorway. But this was not the Marcus she knew. Gone was the gentle engineer who prepared her favorite meals and learned her cultural traditions. The man standing before her moved with predatory grace, his eyes scanning the laboratory like a scanner mapping potential threats. "We need to move. Now," he said, his voice carrying an authority she had never heard before. "The emergency protocols specify that we should report to Safe Zone 7, Zara said, consulting the data pad that contained the station's emergency procedures. "Safe Zone 7 is a trap," Marcus replied curtly. "It is in the outer ring, easily accessible to boarding parties. They will go there first." "How do you know that?" Instead of answering, Marcus moved to her workstation and began rapidly downloading files to a portable storage unit. His fingers flew across the interface with the speed of someone who had done this many times before. "Marcus, you are frightening me." He paused and looked at her. And for a moment, she saw a flicker of the gentle man she loved. "I am sorry, Zara. But if we are going to survive the next few hours, I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that?" The station shuddered as something impacted the outer hull. Through the laboratory's observation port, Zara could see the running lights of the Ravager Guild fleet approaching like a swarm of predatory insects. "Yes," she whispered. "Good. Stay close to me and do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you. Do not question my instructions, no matter how strange they seem." Marcus led her through corridors she had never seen before. Maintenance tunnels and serviceways that bypassed the main passages where panicked civilians were rushing toward the designated safe zones. He moved with absolute confidence, never hesitating at intersections, never consulting station maps or directory systems. "How do you know these routes?" Zara asked as they climbed through a ventilation shaft barely large enough for her four-armed frame. "I memorized the station schematics when I first arrived." "Why?" "Because it seemed like a good idea." They emerged in what appeared to be a storage area near the station's central hub. Marcus immediately went to a wall panel and began entering access codes that Zara was certain were far beyond his security clearance as a civilian engineer. "Marcus, those are restricted command-level codes." "I know." The panel opened to reveal a hidden compartment containing equipment she did not recognize. Marcus pulled out what appeared to be weapons, though their design was unlike anything she had seen in Coalition armories. He also retrieved a suit of body armor that was clearly military grade and definitely not standard civilian emergency equipment. "Who are you?" Zara demanded. Marcus paused in his preparations. "My name is Marcus Chen. I was born on Earth Colony designation Kepler 442b. I worked as an engineer on civilian transport vessels for 3 years." He pulled the armor on with movements that suggested extensive training. "I also served for 8 years in the Terran Defense Force, specializing in hostile environment extraction and close-quarters combat." "You are a soldier." "Was a soldier. I left that life behind when I came to Harmony Station. But soldiers do not just become civilian engineers." Marcus finished sealing his armor and checked the charge on his weapons. "Human soldiers often have trouble readjusting to civilian life after extended combat deployments. The Coalition offered rehabilitation programs to help us integrate into peaceful society." The station shuddered again, more violently this time. Emergency lighting flickered as power fluctuations cascaded through the electrical systems. "They are beginning the boarding process," Marcus said, consulting a small device that displayed tactical information about the station's hull integrity. "We have perhaps 10 minutes before they breach the main airlocks. Then we should contact station security and offer assistance." "Station security is already dead." Zara stared at him in shock. "What do you mean?" "The Ravager Guild does not take chances. Their first target is always the security center. Eliminate organized resistance before it can form." Marcus's voice was coldly analytical, as if he was discussing technical specifications rather than the deaths of people they both knew. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because that is what I would do." The words hung in the air between them like a physical barrier. Zara found herself looking at Marcus as if seeing him clearly for the first time. This was not the gentle, accommodating human who had courted her with patient kindness and cultural sensitivity. This was something else entirely. "The safe zones," she said slowly. "You said they were traps. Concentration points. Gather all the civilians in easily defensible locations, then systematically capture or eliminate them." Marcus moved to another wall panel and activated what appeared to be an internal sensor network. It is basic tactical doctrine. And you know this because? Because I have done it. Before Zara could process the implications of that statement, Marcus's scanner began beeping urgently. On the small display, she could see moving dots that represented life signs throughout the station, a large concentration in the designated safe zones, as expected, but also smaller groups moving through the corridors in organized patterns. Boarding parties, Marcus explained. 4 teams, 12 individuals each, moving in standard sweep formation toward the civilian concentration areas. We have to warn them. We cannot reach them in time. The communication system has already been disabled. Then what do we do? Marcus turned to look at her, and in his eyes, she saw something that made her blood freeze. It was not anger, or fear, or desperation. It was a cold, calculating intelligence that was evaluating her as a tactical asset rather than as a person he cared about. We survive, he said simply. The next few hours became a nightmare that would haunt Zara for the rest of her life. Marcus moved through the station like a ghost, using maintenance shafts and emergency passages to avoid the boarding parties. But avoidance was not his primary objective. He was hunting. Stay here, he whispered, as they reached an observation point overlooking one of the main corridors. Do not move. Do not make any sound. Where are you going? To reduce the threat level, Zara watched through the transparent panel as Marcus seemed to simply vanish into the shadows of the corridor below. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then a patrol of Ravager Guild pirates came into view. They were Vreks, a species known for their aggressive nature and natural armored skin. Each one carried heavy weapons and moved with the confidence of predators who had never encountered effective resistance. There were 4 of them, and they were sweeping the corridor systematically, checking every door and access panel. Zara lost sight of Marcus completely. One moment the corridor was empty except for the patrol, and the next moment, one of the pirates simply collapsed. There was no sound, no visible attack, no indication of what had happened. The pirate was simply there 1 second and down the next. The remaining 3 immediately shifted into defensive formation, weapons ready, searching for threats. That was when Marcus appeared behind the rear guard, like a materialization from a nightmare. What happened next lasted perhaps 30 seconds, but it seemed to unfold in slow motion. Marcus moved through the remaining pirates like a force of nature. There were no dramatic fighting poses or flashy combat techniques, just efficient, brutal violence, applied with surgical precision. When it was over, all 4 pirates were dead, and Marcus was already dragging their bodies out of sight. He returned to Zara's hiding place without a single injury, though his armor was now splattered with alien blood. We need to keep moving, he said calmly, as if he had just completed a routine maintenance task. You killed them. Yes, without hesitation. Hesitation gets you killed. Zara stared at him, trying to reconcile this efficient killer with the man who had spent hours learning to pronounce her name correctly in her native language. How many times have you done this before? More than I care to remember. They moved deeper into the station, and the pattern repeated itself. Marcus would identify a patrol or boarding party, position Zara in a safe location, and then systematically eliminate the threats. Each time, he seemed to become more like a machine and less like the person she thought she knew. It was during the 4th encounter that Zara truly understood what Marcus had meant when he said humans became something else when peaceful options were removed. This boarding party was larger, 8 pirates from different species, all heavily armed and coordinated. They had captured a group of station civilians and were preparing to move them to what Marcus had identified as a processing area. Too many, Zara whispered. You cannot take them all. Watch me. What followed was not a fight. It was a demonstration of why humans had become one of the most feared military forces in the galaxy, despite their relatively recent entry into the galactic community. Marcus did not attack the pirates directly. Instead, he systematically dismantled their ability to function as a unit. He disabled their communications equipment with precisely placed shots that also created electromagnetic pulses, blinding their tactical displays. He collapsed a section of overhead piping that separated the group and created chaos. He used the station's own systems against them, manipulating lighting and atmospheric controls to create confusion and panic. By the time he actually engaged the pirates directly, They were already defeated. They were isolated, confused, and unable to coordinate their response to threats they could not see coming. The civilians were rescued, though they looked at Marcus with expressions of terror rather than gratitude. Even to their own rescuer, he had become something monstrous. "The command center," Marcus said as they regrouped in another hidden area. "That is where their leadership will be coordinating the operation. How many will be there? Unknown. But it does not matter." Gross. "What do you mean it does not matter?" Marcus checked his weapons and ammunition supplies. "Because I am not going there to fight them." "Then what?" "I am going there to end this." The journey to the command center took them through areas of the station that Zara had never seen before. Emergency passages and maintenance areas that seemed to exist in a completely different world from the comfortable living spaces where she and Marcus had built their life together. As they moved, Marcus explained the tactical situation with the detached professionalism of someone giving a technical briefing. The Ravager Guild operates on a predictable pattern. Disable defenses, secure key areas, process captured civilians and resources, withdraw before coalition forces can respond. They have been using this approach successfully for over a decade. How do you stop them? You disrupt the pattern, remove their command and control capabilities, eliminate their ability to coordinate withdrawal, and suddenly, they become just a collection of individual pirates trapped on a station they cannot escape from. But the command center will be heavily defended. Yes, which is why I am not going to attack it directly. They reached an access hatch that led to the lower levels of the station's central hub. Marcus consulted his tactical display and nodded with satisfaction. "Zara, I need you to understand something. What I am about to do goes against everything your people believe about appropriate conflict resolution. It goes against everything I told you about human values and peaceful coexistence. What are you going to do? I am going to show you why every military force in the galaxy has learned to fear humans in combat." Marcus opened the access hatch and began descending into the station's power generation section. The area was filled with massive machinery that provided energy to every system on Harmony Station. "You are going to sabotage the power grid?" "No. I am going to turn the station itself into a weapon." What Marcus did next required knowledge of station systems that went far beyond anything a civilian engineer should possess. He accessed primary power distribution networks, modified safety protocols, and began redirecting energy flows in ways that Zara was certain would either kill them both or destroy the entire station. The Ravager Guild fleet maintains minimal shields while conducting boarding operations, Marcus explained as he worked. They rely on their boarding parties to secure targets quickly, so they preserve power for their own offensive capabilities. So when the station's shields suddenly expand beyond their normal parameters and begin generating destructive interference patterns, their ships will be caught completely off guard. You can do that? Human engineering focuses on adaptability. We design our systems to be modified for unexpected purposes. Marcus finished his modifications and activated the new power configuration. What other species call impossible, we call improvisation. The station's lights flickered as enormous amounts of energy were redirected to the shield generators. But instead of the normal defensive barrier, the shields began expanding outward in a configuration that Zara had never seen before. Electromagnetic pulse weapons, integrated into the shield matrix, Marcus explained. Designed to disable electronic systems rather than stop physical impacts. Through the station's hull, they could see the Ravager Guild ships suddenly going dark as their electronic systems overloaded. Ships that had been maneuvering with predatory grace began drifting helplessly, their crews trapped inside hulks of metal without life support or propulsion. "Their boarding parties are now stranded," Marcus said with satisfaction. "No extraction, no support, no means of escape, but they are still armed and dangerous." "Yes, which brings us to the final phase." Marcus led her to a communication station and began broadcasting on all channels throughout Harmony Station. "Attention Ravager Guild personnel. This is Marcus Chen, Terran Defense Force, speaking for the human civilian population of this station. Your fleet has been neutralized. Your extraction capabilities have been eliminated. You are now trapped on Harmony Station with approximately 3,000 civilians who were perfectly happy to live in peace until you decided to threaten them. He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a quality that made Zara's skin crawl. I want you to understand your situation clearly. You are not facing station security. You are not facing coalition peacekeepers. You are facing humans who have been forced to abandon diplomatic solutions. We tried to build a peaceful community here. We welcomed dozens of species as partners and friends. We adapted to their cultures, learned their languages, and bent over backwards to accommodate their needs. Another pause. You have just reminded us why our ancestors spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of warfare before we ever learned to travel between stars. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to coalition conventions for prisoners of war. Continue your current course of action, and discover why every military academy in the galaxy now includes mandatory courses on human tactical doctrine. The response came within minutes. Across the station, Ravager Guild personnel began surrendering to civilian groups who had suddenly found themselves armed with improvised weapons and led by humans who seemed to have transformed overnight into military commanders. It was over in less than 2 hours. A pirate raid that should have resulted in the destruction of Harmony Station and the death or enslavement of everyone aboard had instead become a comprehensive defeat for one of the most feared criminal organizations in the galaxy. But for Zara, the victory felt hollow. As she watched Marcus coordinate the processing of prisoners and the restoration of station systems, she realized that the gentle, accommodating man she had fallen in love with might never have truly existed at all. You lied to me, she said as the immediate crisis ended, and they found themselves alone in the command center. No, Marcus replied without looking up from his tactical displays. I told you exactly who I was. I just did not tell you who I used to be. Is there a difference? Marcus finally turned to face her, and she saw exhaustion in his features that went far beyond physical fatigue. I hoped there was. I came to Harmony Station because I wanted to believe that humans could be something other than the most efficient killers the galaxy has ever produced. And now? Now I remember why that was always a foolish hope. 3 days after the Ravager Guild attack, Harmony Station had returned to something resembling normal operations. The damaged sections were being repaired, the captured pirates had been transferred to Coalition custody, and the disabled enemy ships were being salvaged for parts and intelligence. To an outside observer, it might have seemed as though the crisis had never happened, but Zara knew that everything had changed. She stood in their shared quarters, watching Marcus through the transparent wall that separated their living space from the main corridor. He was speaking with Commander Thylex and several Coalition investigators who had arrived to document what was already being called the most successful defense against pirate attack in Coalition history. Marcus looked exactly as he always had. Same brown hair, same tired eyes, same gentle way of gesturing when he explained something complex. But now Zara could see the predator that lurked beneath that peaceful exterior. The way his eyes automatically tracked movement in his peripheral vision, how he positioned himself near exits and cover even during casual conversations, the subtle tension in his posture that suggested he was always ready for violence. How had she missed it before? How had any of them missed it? The door seal hissed as Marcus entered their quarters. He moved to their small kitchen area and began preparing tea with the same careful attention to detail he had always shown. But even this simple domestic task now seemed different to Zara. His movements were too precise, too efficient. Like a soldier maintaining equipment, rather than a partner sharing a quiet moment. The Coalition investigators want to interview you tomorrow, Marcus said without looking up from his preparations. Standard procedure after a hostile incident. What will I tell them? The truth. That you were present during the attack and witnessed the station's defensive response. Zara studied his profile as he worked. Is that what happened? A defensive response? Marcus paused in his tea preparation. What else would you call it? What I witnessed was not defense, Marcus. It was systematic extermination carried out by someone who had clearly done such things many times before. Does the distinction matter? Everyone survived. Everyone survived because you had the knowledge and skills to commit efficient violence against other living beings. Where did that knowledge come from? Marcus finally turned to face her, and she saw that exhaustion in his features again. The weariness of someone carrying burdens he could never fully share. You want to know about my military service? I want to know who you really are. Marcus handed her a cup of tea and settled into his chair. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the steam from their cups creating small clouds between them. The Terran Defense Force specializes in asymmetric warfare, Marcus began finally. We operate in situations where conventional military tactics are ineffective. Hostage rescue, counterterrorism, deep reconnaissance, elimination of high-value targets. You were an assassin. I was a soldier who sometimes had to kill specific people to prevent larger conflicts. How many? More than I care to remember. Zara set down her teacup with trembling hands. And you never thought to mention this when we began our relationship? Would it have changed anything if I had? I do not know. But I deserve the choice to make that decision for myself. Marcus nodded slowly. You are right. I should have told you. But I hoped. He trailed off, shaking his head. You hoped what? I hoped I could leave that part of myself behind. When I came to Harmony Station, I thought I could become the person you fell in love with permanently. You mean you could pretend to be someone else? No, I mean I could evolve into someone else. The distinction seemed important to him, though Zara was not certain she understood the difference. Explain. Marcus stood and moved to their observation window, looking out at the star field beyond. Humans are not naturally violent, Zara. We do not enjoy killing or causing pain. But we are naturally adaptable. When our environment requires us to be warriors, we become warriors. When it requires us to be diplomats, we become diplomats. So which are you really? Both. Neither. I am whatever the situation requires me to be. Zara joined him at the window. That is what frightens me. Why? Because it means I can never truly know you. How can I love someone who changes their fundamental nature based on external circumstances? Marcus turned to look at her, and for the first time since the attack, she saw genuine pain in his expression. Do you think I enjoyed what I had to do? I think you were very good at it. Being good at something and enjoying it are different things. I did what was necessary to protect innocent people. The fact that I was efficient at it does not mean I took pleasure in it. But you did not hesitate. When you killed those pirates, you showed no more emotion than you would when repairing a broken machine. Hesitation gets people killed, Zara. In combat situations, you cannot afford the luxury of moral consideration. You assess threats. You neutralize them. You move on. Everything else is a distraction that could cost lives. Lives like mine. Yes, the simple honesty of his response somehow made it worse. He had not killed those pirates because they were evil, or because he was angry. He had killed them because they threatened her, and that was sufficient justification for him to become a remorseless killer. What happens the next time someone threatens Harmony Station? Zara asked. If diplomatic solutions are possible, we will pursue them, and if they are not, then I will do whatever is necessary to protect the people I care about, including me, especially you. Zara felt something cold settle in her chest. Even if I do not want you to. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Yes, even if it means becoming someone I cannot love. Yes, the weight of that admission hung between them like a physical barrier. Zara realized that Marcus was offering her a choice. But it was not the choice she wanted. She could accept him as he was, complete with the capacity for efficient violence, or she could lose him entirely. There was no middle ground where he remained the gentle engineer while somehow losing his military capabilities. I need time to think, she said finally. I understand. I'm going to stay in the guest quarters for a few days. Of course. As she packed a small bag with her immediate necessities, Zara was struck by how calmly Marcus accepted her decision. He did not argue or plead or try to convince her to stay. He simply acknowledged her choice and adapted to the new circumstances, just as he had adapted to the pirate attack. Was this what their entire relationship had been? Marcus constantly adapting to her needs and preferences while concealing his true nature? Had she ever known the real person, or only the version he thought she wanted to see? The guest quarters were smaller than their shared space, but adequate for her needs. They also provided her with the solitude necessary to process everything she had learned about the man she thought she loved. Over the next several days, Zara threw herself into her work, analyzing the data she had collected before the attack and preparing reports on the xenobiological samples from the Perseus Arm expedition. But she found it difficult to concentrate. Every time she looked up from her microscope or data analysis terminal, she found herself thinking about Marcus and the impossible choice he had presented her. It was Dr. VX who finally forced her to confront her feelings directly. "You are avoiding the human," the Corvan diplomat observed during their weekly research coordination meeting. "I am giving myself time to process recent events." "And what have you concluded?" Zara set down her stylus and looked at her colleague. Dr. VX had been on Harmony Station since its inception and had more experience with interspecies relationships than anyone else in the coalition. "I discovered that the person I thought I loved was not entirely real." Dr. Veek said knowingly. "You learned about human military capabilities." "You knew?" "Of course I knew. Did you think the coalition would assign civilian engineers to a critical diplomatic outpost without thorough background investigations? Then why did no one tell me?" "Because it was not relevant to your relationship until circumstances made it relevant." Zara stared at her. "Not relevant? He is a trained killer." "He is a trained protector," Dr. VX corrected gently. "There is a difference." "Is there? Consider this. When the pirates attacked, what did he do first?" He made sure I was safe. And then, he eliminated the threats to civilian personnel. And after the immediate danger was over, he coordinated medical assistance and damage control efforts." Dr. VX leaned back in her chair. "Does this sound like the behavior of someone who enjoys violence? Or someone who uses violence as a tool to protect others?" But he was so efficient at it. So cold. Would you have preferred that he be emotional and inefficient? Would you have preferred that more people die because he hesitated or allowed his feelings to interfere with his judgment? The question struck at the heart of Zara's confusion. She realized that what truly disturbed her was not that Marcus had been violent, but that he had been good at it. The efficiency with which he had dismantled the pirate threat suggested a level of experience that made her uncomfortable. "How many humans on Harmony Station have similar backgrounds?" she asked. "Approximately 30% of the human population has some level of military experience," Dr. VX replied. "The coalition specifically recruited individuals with diverse skill sets to ensure the station could function independently in emergency situations. So we are surrounded by soldiers. We are surrounded by people who can become soldiers when necessary, but who choose to be teachers and engineers and artists and diplomats when circumstances permit. And you do not find this deceptive?" Dr. VX tilted her head in the expression Corvans used to indicate careful consideration. "Tell me, Zara. Before the attack, was Marcus kind to you?" "Yes." "Did he treat you with respect and consideration?" "Always." "Did he show genuine interest in your culture and make efforts to adapt to your needs?" "Of course, but nothing. The Marcus you fell in love with was not a deception. He was Marcus choosing to be the best version of himself in peaceful circumstances. The Marcus who saved the station was the same person choosing to be what the situation required in violent circumstances. How can one person contain such contradictions? How can one person not contain such contradictions? Do you think Corvans are incapable of violence when threatened? Do you believe Keitherans have never fought wars to protect their families?" And Zara was forced to admit that every species in the coalition had military capabilities and histories of conflict. The difference seemed to be that most species compartmentalized those capabilities into separate institutions and specialized personnel. Humans, apparently, integrated those capabilities into their general population. "It is their adaptability," she said slowly, beginning to understand. "Precisely. Other species develop specialized responses to specific environmental challenges. Humans develop generalized responses that can be adapted to any challenge. Quote, which makes them unpredictable, which makes them uniquely valuable as partners and uniquely dangerous as enemies." That evening, Zara found herself standing outside the quarters she had shared with Marcus. She could see him through the transparent wall, sitting at their small table and working on what appeared to be a technical report. He looked exactly as he always had during their quiet evenings together, except for the subtle changes she now recognized as constant threat awareness. When he noticed her in the corridor, he came to the door immediately. Zara, are you all right? I want to ask you something. Of course. If the pirates had not attacked, would you have ever told me about your military background? Marcus considered the question seriously. I do not know. I hoped I would never need to. But you were prepared to let me believe you were just a civilian engineer forever. I was prepared to let you know me as a civilian engineer forever. Because that is what I wanted to be. But that is not who you are. It is part of who I am. Just as your analytical mind is part of who you are, even when you are not working in your laboratory. 5. Zara studied his face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. But she saw only the same honest openness that had first attracted her to him. I need to know that you will not lie to me again, she said. I never lied to you. But I will not conceal information again. Even if you think it will hurt me, even then. And I need to know that you will not make decisions about my safety without consulting me. That I cannot promise. Why not? Because if you are in immediate danger, I will not waste time on consultation. I will neutralize the threat first, and apologize for overriding your autonomy later. It was not the answer Zara wanted, but it was honest. And she realized that this was the choice Marcus had presented her. Accept him as he was, complete with his protective instincts and capacity for violence, or lose him entirely. Will you come inside? Marcus asked. I have been working on modifications to the station's defensive systems. I thought you might want to see them. Zara followed him into their quarters and found herself looking at detailed engineering schematics that showed how Harmony Station's civilian systems could be rapidly converted for military purposes if necessary. You are turning our home into a fortress. I am ensuring that we will never again be helpless, if threatened. And this does not bother you? Living in a place designed for war? Marcus looked up from his schematics. These modifications will never be visible during normal operations. The station will continue to function exactly as it always has. But if we are attacked again, we will be prepared. You expect us to be attacked again? I expect to be prepared for any possibility. Zara sat down across from him, studying the complex diagrams. Show me how it works. For the next 2 hours, Marcus walked her through his defensive modifications. As he explained each system, she began to see the elegant logic behind his planning. He had not simply added weapons to a civilian station. He had created adaptive systems that could serve multiple purposes depending on circumstances. It is like biological evolution, she said suddenly. What do you mean? You are not changing the station's fundamental nature. You are giving it the ability to adapt to different environmental pressures. Marcus smiled, and for the first time since the attack, it was the same gentle expression she remembered falling in love with. Exactly. The station remains a center for diplomacy and research, but it can also become a fortress if necessary. And you remain an engineer and diplomat, but you can also become a warrior if necessary. Yes. Zara reached across the table and took his hand. I think I am beginning to understand. Do you think you can accept it? I think I can learn to love all of who you are, instead of just the parts that make me comfortable. Marcus lifted her hand and pressed it to his lips, a gesture so gentle, it was hard to believe the same hands had efficiently killed 4 armed pirates just days earlier. I love you, Zara. Both the brilliant scientist who can spend hours analyzing molecular structures, and the person who was brave enough to follow me through a hostile station during an attack, even though I was terrified the entire time? Especially because you were terrified but did it anyway. As they sat together in the soft light of their quarters, Zara realized that her understanding of love itself had evolved. She had thought love meant accepting someone exactly as they appeared to be, but true love meant accepting someone as they actually were, complete with complexities and contradictions and hidden depths that might take a lifetime to fully explore. Marcus? Yes? If we are going to build a life together, I want to know everything. Your childhood, your military service, your hopes for the future. All of it, even the parts that might disturb you, especially those parts. I want to love the whole person, not just the comfortable pieces. Marcus nodded solemnly. Then we should probably start with why I really came to Harmony Station. What do you mean? The rehabilitation program was voluntary. I could have chosen any number of civilian positions throughout Coalition space. I specifically requested assignment to a diplomatic outpost in neutral territory. Why? Because I wanted to prove that humans could be trusted with peaceful coexistence, that we were not just efficient killers who pretended to be civilized when it suited us. And now? Now I think I understand that the two things are not mutually exclusive. We can be both peaceful and prepared for war. We can choose diplomacy while maintaining the capability for violence. The key is making sure we choose correctly. And how do we do that? Marcus squeezed her hand gently. Together. With people we trust to help us make the right decisions. With partners who can see all of who we are and love us anyway. Outside their observation window, the stars continued their ancient dance across the void. Harmony Station orbited its red dwarf sun, a small oasis of civilization in the vast darkness between worlds, and in their quarters, a human and a Ketharan began the complex process of building a relationship based not on comfortable illusions, but on the challenging reality of love between two people who were each far more complex than they had initially appeared. It would not be easy. But as Zara had learned during the pirate attack, the most valuable things rarely were. The next morning brought news that would validate Marcus's defensive preparations sooner than anyone expected. Long-range sensors detected another fleet approaching Harmony Station, this one flying coalition colors. But Marcus was taking no chances. As he monitored their approach, his fingers danced across the tactical systems he had installed, ready to determine whether these new arrivals were truly allies or another threat in disguise. Zara watched him work and realized that she was no longer disturbed by his constant vigilance. Instead, she felt safe. For the first time since learning about his military background, she understood that Marcus's capacity for violence was not separate from his gentleness. It was the foundation that made his gentleness possible. He could choose to be kind because he was capable of being deadly. He could choose peace because he was prepared for war. And she could choose to love him because she finally understood that true strength came not from avoiding difficult truths, but from embracing them completely. The approaching fleet turned out to be a coalition diplomatic convoy, arriving to formally commend Harmony Station's successful defense and to discuss expanded security arrangements for frontier diplomatic outposts. As Marcus powered down his defensive systems and prepared to welcome their visitors, Zara reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. She had begun this experience believing she understood the nature of love, strength, and humanity itself. Now she realized she was only beginning to learn.